Well, I'm here with Nicole Esposito, and she was just telling me that she's Italian, which I want to hear more about. Thanks so much, Nicole, for being my fourth interview on the Flutist Pioneers Series. It's all about creative flutists who put their own spin on things. So I didn't know you were Italian.
Yeah. My whole family is Italian. All my grandparents were born in Italy, mostly from the southern part. So we're pretty hard-headed people, determined, you know. And so, yes, I know we were talking about pronouncing my last name. It is Esposito, is the Italian way to pronounce it. Most people in the US say Esposito, and if it were Spanish, it would be Esposito. But you can call me anything. My students call me Profe, Profespo.
Profespo, that's cute.
So it's all good.
Well, I'm very excited to talk to you. With creativity being the theme, I thought you were a perfect person to interview because, one, you're just so prolific. I love how you play your flute all the time and you're constantly sharing with everybody. And then, as I was exploring your website and learning a little bit more about you, if you don't mind me quoting you
Sure.
to you, it really caught my attention and resonated with me so much. The way that you conceptualize sound. So you write on your website, sound begins not when we breathe to play our instruments, but rather it began from the very moment we were even aware that we were breathing, that we were alive. Our sound, our voice, is cultivated from a lifetime of experience, challenges, celebrations, setbacks, and successes. I mean, just the encouragement for flutists to be uniquely themselves as they sing through their flute. I cannot even tell you how much I love that. Could you speak more to why you love playing your flute all the time and sharing and what you think about sound, just anything that pops into your mind?
Sure. I mean, when obviously when we learn an instrument, we're learning it as an external object. But as we grow older, we learn that most of the answers are actually in here. So after studying and we get this opinion and this school of playing and that school of playing, and I mean that's all important, of course, in terms of technical things, in terms of understanding the instrument. But we are the real instruments, so it's really important to understand ourselves very well, both mentally, spiritually, physically. I think, especially the mental and the spiritual part, I think really informs the physical a lot. One of the things I'm most proud of as a teacher is that I've never had a student with an injury. And I think you really have to understand yourself very, very well, because when you understand yourself, you don't have as much tension, whether it be mental or physical. And then we know tension is what causes problems of imbalances and physical imbalances. So that's something that's really, really just important to me in general, in terms of my whole approach to playing the flute and just living, and is balance, good balance. I think that goes in just about anything in life. That balance is a good thing that we need to have. um, so I think especially with the flute, because the flute really is like a microphone. We don't buzz into a mouthpiece. We don't have a reed. So really we are the instrument, and the flute is like a very nice receptacle, basically. um, it receives everything that we're doing, and I think we spend so much time trying to figure out it, but actually it needs to kind of align with us.
Yeah. Oh, I can't even tell you how much I like the way that you conceptualize this. That's such a big deal for me. Open mind, open heart, open body. We have to be open just like the flute is because, like you said, it's a microphone. It projects everything that's going on with us.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. One thing I really admire about you is just how your whole presence as a flutist and a teacher, I can tell it's all about beauty. It's all about beauty and color and just putting out lovely things into the world. Do you mind speaking a little bit about what
Sure.
drives you to share and just be so beauty centered?
Absolutely. I mean, I look, the only thing I ever wanted to be with the flute when I was young was good. And I think I got pretty good at it, and all the rest has been such an enormous like bonus and a blessing. And I just feel so incredibly blessed with everything, the life that the flute has basically brought me. I mean, obviously, I had a hand in that, but so I hope to be a very genuine person, and I try to live that way. And so what you see of me online is really just kind of my day-to-day life, with the flute. And it's just like, here's what I'm playing today, here's what I'm doing today, whether it be a piece, of scales, or whatever. So I try to just give a very kind of honest representation of what I'm doing. This year, I recorded a lot of pieces during the pandemic, a lot of acapellas, something like 150 of them or something. I don't know.
Wow.
It was like 700 something individual videos, I think. And I did it once sort of like a fun because I had never did it. So I asked people, do you like this? And they seemed to like it. So I just started, kind of doing them every day, and I got so many amazing kind messages about how it was helpful, and it was a comfort to people. And just, we're also kind of small and insignificant in the world, but we have the power to be significant to someone. And I know that I've been blessed with that ability, and I try to offer that as humbly as I can to hopefully make someone else's day a little bit better if I can, in the way that I can do. Only I can do it. We're all unique, and you do the same, And I think that's why it's so important to be uniquely yourself, because only you can contribute that thing that maybe somebody needs, And I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, I'm having this thought that I think would be fun for us to talk about. I get this comment a lot from students and people that maybe read something I've written or hear something that I've performed, and it goes one of two ways. It either goes, "Wow, that was so inspiring," which of course is what you're talking about and what we want, right? Or, "Oh my gosh, I could never do that," and
Mm-hmm.
they really focus on the gap
Mm-hmm.
between someone like you who's very confident and clear in her message, and then they don't feel as confident and clear, and so it's a little bit of a challenge to think, oh, I could ever share like that. Do you have any words of wisdom?
Absolutely, yeah, I know. It's tough. For example, one of my students in a seminar, she was feeling not so strong. Our performance class wasn't feeling not so strong about something, and she's a music therapist. And I said, you're the only one in this room who can sing, play guitar, play the piano, And so I know, at least with my own students, I really try to like cultivate in them like really what makes them unique and special, and I don't want them to all be the same, or just try to be like me. And sometimes they come to me and they want to do something a little different, and they think they're going to disappoint me, and I said, I don't care. And I care about you. I don't care about what you do. So yeah, I think I know it's tough. I mean, I'm sure you hear a lot of students talking about like imposter syndrome and things like that. And um, I never experienced that. Like, it's not something that I can relate to. I had a lot of struggles, growing up and things like that, whether it be with bullying or whatever. And I don't know, I always had a belief in myself somehow. So and if someone doubted me, that's my like fuel to like do even better. Maybe that's that Italian blood that I have that makes me really determined. So I will admit that sometimes I have a hard time relating when a student is going through that. If someone is going through that, but my way is to try to help them cultivate, within themselves, what makes them happy, and what makes them unique.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember this, but I've actually been on stage with you turning pages, while you gave a concert, and
Sure.
I know that you have a tremendous energy and you're talking about this Italian blood and this passion and it brings to mind another topic. I've been talking with students lately about how, when I was a student, of course there was this buffer between trying to process, okay, I'm in the audience and I'm watching these amazing musicians and maybe not realizing the energy level and the emotion level of what it takes to be on stage. But now they're not only dealing with that buffer, student to professional or student to artist, but they're dealing with growing up always with Google and smartphones and instant gratification and screens for everything. So that's like a second buffer. Now we have a worldwide pandemic where we've also been, isolated at home and we can't even do anything without our computers. And I feel like it's more important than ever for them to understand the level of energy and emotion that it takes. Could you speak to how to tap into that?
I'm laughing because I told my students, I'm like, look here, I'm in my 40s and I feel like I got more energy than all you kids put together, right? So I have probably more energy than the average person. I will admit that. When I get on a kick of something, I just have, I have to kind of do it. So that's the one thing that I feel like is like I really notice the difference between like me and like a younger generation, is the energy level sometimes. And even if they're really competent and wonderful, part of it is also curiosity. That's a big thing, that kind of goes together, curiosity and energy, like as you said, because they don't have to have curiosity. They can just go Google, find the answer, and then kind of there it is and it's done. So, when I remember when I was a kid, I had to, like, if I wanted a CD, I had to go to the catalog and order it, or fill out a postcard and mail it and order the CD or something like that. So it was like when you got it, it was like a real accomplishment, So I definitely think that's an issue. And yeah, the energy thing. I think, again, it goes back to knowing yourself really well and finding out like what motivates you. And I even told my students at the beginning of the year, I was like, I don't want to motivate you. I want you to be motivated, like I don't want to feel like I have more energy than you do. It should be the other way around, if anything, like you're the one chomping at the bit here to do things. So yeah, it's tough. It's tough. And I think, as teachers, we have to understand that, yeah, as you said, times are changed, we know both sides, they don't, So it is a tough issue. Again, I just try to always find what they're passionate about. I think that's really key, rather than this is what we're going to do and, you have to follow this protocol and that's, how I want, because I don't think that really sets them up to be successful, especially in this day and age where there's so many different possible paths, So I think, again, trying to just cultivate the individual as much as possible so that they find their own self-motivation and kind of guiding light.
Yeah, one of my favorite things to do is ask them what kind of music they enjoy listening to besides classical, and I will flat out blast it full volume, and we will improv and play games to it, even if it's rap or hip hop or something that seems so far off. But I think, they have to understand it doesn't matter how many centuries in between or how different the genre or style, rhythm is rhythm. Feeling is feeling. And like you're saying, what lights them up is what's going to light up their classical music.
Absolutely. Too. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've done so many different kinds of things like that, with students. And I read your thing the other day on Facebook. I think it was Embrace the Weird, and I say that all the time, I'm like, whatever it takes, because sometimes I ask, like when they're playing a piece and I'm like, do you have a certain image or story going on in your head as you play this? And I'm like, okay, it's a girl and with flowers. Okay, what kind of girl is it? Does she have long hair, short hair, punk rock hair? Does she smell like cupcakes, or does she smell like Chanel No. 5? Like, does she have a dog? Does she have a cat? Is it winter? Is it summer? And I think, just trying to expand their imagination a little bit more. Going back to your, first question about what motivates me or what I love about playing the flute is, we're kind of just like musical actors, right? So we get to basically transport ourselves in time as well. We can go to the Baroque period, or we can go to the Romantic period, and just that unique ability that we have to embrace all of these different kinds of characters and moods, I find so appealing and fascinating. And that's another thing that I find with students is like, the energy and the imagination, using their imaginations more. I always joke that I grew up watching soap operas. I'm watching a Colombian soap opera right now that's very dramatic. So you have to have wild storylines in your head.
Yes. Actually, sometimes when a student is very low energy and I just really want to pull out all the stops to turn it around, I'll say, okay, imagine a middle-aged white guy in a middle-income job that works from 9 to 5, eats the same lunch every day. And I go on for a while, and then at a certain point I go, no piece of music was ever written about this man. Somebody's always dying, or
yes, absolutely,
long lost love, or it's got to be big.
Absolutely. Yeah, and in what place, in a full recital, you could go from playing like Piazzolla, which is, maybe about a woman of the night, and then, play something heavenly by Bach, so you get to be like complete opposite ends of the spectrum within a few minutes, which I think is so great, and fascinating.
I'm sure you're very good at helping students branch out of their comfort zones. And I don't know why this is popping in my mind right now. Maybe you said music of the night, or, sometimes when students have to play Daphnis, or Salome, and it just gets so sexy with the, the striptease dance.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like there's like a mischievous, flirtatious nature. And I think sometimes for students, it's hard to conceptualize taking on that acting role. Do you have any tips?
Absolutely. Look, this day and age is hard too, because you're not supposed to say certain things. But you just can't get around it. It's some music is just sexy, and it's about sex, and music. Someone asked me on another interview or thing a couple weeks ago about. Do I like a clean flute sound? And I replied, well, I like a flute sound that reflects life, and life isn't always clean, So whatever that means, there's ups and downs, goods and bads, naughty and nice. There's a lot of stuff. So, we have to find all kinds of colors and make them, really beautiful, even if it's like a dirty flute tone, So yeah, I had one student that I was saying she was real, because I'm very high energy, so sometimes the younger ones get a little bit like, and I was like, look, I'm not mad at you or anything like that. I'm just excited. Like, I just, I'm here with you. I want this moment to work, And I said, I think you're just scared of me. I said, maybe you got mad at me once or twice because I'm so, demanding. And she was like, I don't know. And I was like, would you feel better if you told me to F off? I'm like, I told her, like, just screaming at me, and she was like, could I really do that? And I was like, yes, I want you to do it, and once I did the same thing with another student. I just felt like her spirit wasn't there. She was a beautiful player, but she just like her spirit flew away, and I wanted it to be like, there. And I just stood there staring at, this was a doctoral student, so it was an older student, and I stood there staring at her for a while, and she kind of looked at me, and she didn't realize I was reaching behind me. I had a full plastic bottle of water, and I picked it up, and I threw it against the wall as hard as I could, and she just was like, and then I went over to her and smiled, and I handed it to her. I said, now your turn, and she was kind of hesitating. I was like, throw the and she threw it, and then, she, really opened up, because it was just like, sometimes they just need to release things. And even she told her mother, she goes, "Oh, that's so sweet, she's helping you." So, I mean, of course, as a teacher, you got to know when you can do these things, and sometimes it doesn't work for some students, and sometimes it doesn't go over so well, and you have to watch out for that. But sometimes there's certain things that you just have, if you really want to break through, you can't just say, "Well, practice your technical aware number 4 this week," and it's all fine. I mean, we have to do that at certain points, but it's not usually about that if they're not breaking through somehow. And I tend to, another maybe gift that I have is I can kind of like, one of my students says, "Man, you can spill that tea real easily." So I can just kind of pinpoint right to what the issue is, and some of them want to get better and some of them don't. They don't want someone to point that out to them, because that means they're going to have to like face that if they want to get better. So it's always a fine line and a balancing, and you take risks too, as a teacher. But sometimes you can't get anywhere. You can't really get to a real place of advancement if you don't take risks. So I tend to be on the riskier side and do whatever it takes, kind of.
Well, I think you and I are kindred spirits. I love those moments where you can break through no matter how zany the activity is. Once we had a bunch of candy in a sack nearby because there had been a Halloween party. And I had this beautiful, talented student who was so terrified of making a mistake that I had her and her lesson partner take the candy and just throw it around the room, like Mardi Gras or something. And I refused to let them clean it up until they just got that feeling of like, make a mess, do some stuff. And then the playing after that is very different.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Do you have any stories of times when maybe you did get stuck, or you had kind of a lower period and then you turned it around? Have you always just been an energized dynamo?
I mean, I can't lie to you. The answer is kind of yeah, I have. I mean, I have always been like that. A couple years ago, it's not that I got, I've never gotten discouraged with the flute. I've never doubted myself. I can say that with certainty. I've never thought like, oh, gee, maybe nope, never. It just hasn't happened. And not because I think I'm wonderful, it's because I know the kind of work that I put into it.
Right.
Like I know that I work every day to deserve that kind of comfort that I have with myself, So that's why I don't doubt myself, in that sense. I'm also honest when I'm not, if I'm not up to snuff with something. I'll say, well, that's not good, and I'll whip myself into shape if that's the case, And sometimes you go, well, that's not very good, and I don't really care right now, and I'll get to it later, So, you have those moments too. A couple years ago, I did hit a little bit of, I think, just go. I've been teaching almost 15 years at University of Iowa. I've never taken a sabbatical. Usually my summers are really tons of travel, festivals, things like that. So a couple years ago, I did physically, I was like, kind of like, my body just went into like shock mode or something. I had, it seemed like a kind of panic attack symptoms, and I had to kind of reevaluate myself a little bit. And, as I got up every day at, 5:30. I was at school by 6:30, it was just like, go. And so I did, learn to maybe relax a little bit more. It's not that I don't relax, because I love to have fun and relax, and I can sit down and watch, Netflix for hours, and that's no problem. But I think that, there were a few things that I had to make sure that I was keeping in balance. And I think that's, important that we all make sure we do.
Yeah, no, back to that word balance. And, speaking of Netflix, I think sometimes my students are surprised when I love it when they have a Netflix binge or they're really into a show. To me, as a musician, that's not a guilty pleasure. That's like living more life vicariously through characters and more
Absolutely.
imagination development.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think, not everything can be learned in the practice room, and I mean, I would be practicing probably while I'm watching the Netflix because my brain, if I can't practice in silence, I'll get so distracted by my own energy in my head. So I need sort of a secondary thing to be occupying my brain. Yeah, I mean, sometimes students say, "What do I do if I have a bad tone day?" I said, "Put the flute away, go have an ice cream cone." I mean, you can't do that every day, but sometimes, you just need to go and live life and do other things, and that will inform your work on the instrument also.
Yeah. If you don't mind me circling back around to you cultivating your students' individuality
Mm-hmm.
and their own path, I'm so big on creativity because as flutists, just the way you describe sound, we're creating our sound, we're
Mm-hmm.
creating our practice session, we're creating our days in our musical life. How do you help your students foster that creativity once maybe a path has been identified?
Sure. I mean, it's funny, sometimes people use that word with me, creative. I don't find myself to be a particularly creative person. I'm a pretty savvy person and pretty clever person, in terms of like, uh, I don't know. I mean, I understand that word creativity can also mean a lot of different things. But I think, again, with students, I ask them a lot of questions, try to get to know like what they want to do, and I'll suggest things. I'll say, well, are you into that? And if they're like, well, actually, I'm not into that. I'm like, okay, well, let's try this, or give suggestions. And even with repertoire, I mean, I try to not give the same pieces to like students that are at the same time or stuff like that. So I think it's also important that the other students are learning uh, from each other. So I don't really have like a curriculum or anything like that for my students. I mean, of course there are certain pieces we always kind of teach, but yeah, again, I think it's just just having a lot of conversations with the students, questions. um, you know if they're struggling a little bit with that, try to help them down a path. Hey, have you heard about this person? I often pair up grad students and undergrads too. Like if I know an undergrad has a little bit of an interest in contemporary music and one of the grad students is really strong with that, then they feel maybe a little, like you say, less intimidated. It's like, well, a professor can do all that stuff, blah blah blah. But if they talk to the grad student, then it's a little bit more feeling of on their level, someone going through all that. And also for the graduate students, it's good for them to be able to kind of weed out their thoughts a little bit, in terms of, how they might teach it, or how they might not really have thought about their approach in that kind of tactical way, in a way that they had to teach it to somebody else. So yeah, again, I mean, it's just kind of whatever it takes. And for some students it could be one thing, and the other student could be completely the opposite. And I think that's, if you want to be a successful teacher these days, you have to embrace that, or else it's going to be really difficult. I think gone are the days where you could just say like, okay, we're going to play the French book, the Bach Sonata, this, the orchestra excerpts, and here's your flute curriculum, and listen to these 5 people, and there you go. So, I think that's not gonna really cut it these days.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the necessity of changing our mindset about flute curriculum and teaching and kind of being in 2021 and beyond, I love hearing how flutists put their own spin on things. So, can you think of things that maybe you do differently than the teachers that taught you so much, I'm sure, but you've taken more of an individual path?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, of course, I'm so grateful for my wonderful teachers. They're absolutely amazing, and I'm so happy I, studied with who I studied with and everything. Um, I think I even tell my own students, like, look, I don't want you to like carry on my legacy or something like that. I want to help you be who you are, and then you go and do great things, and hopefully even better than I have done. So one thing that I really try to do, and I think it's just my personality, like I I kind of question everything. I want to know, like, is that the real spin on it? So even everything I learned from my teachers was amazing, great, wonderful information, and obviously helped to sculpt me into who I am now. I think I questioned it all in a way that, like, can I really understand this, or can I help someone else understand this, especially in kind of non-flutistic terms. So I think sometimes an issue with pedagogy, especially in the flute world, because it's a very popular instrument, there's so many of us. Sometimes I find with pedagogy, people are trying to come up with being creative and coming up with new things, and actually sometimes it gets further and further away from what is actually happening. And so that's the danger of that. And because, I'm doing a master class and I don't want to be the same as this guy, so I gotta say something different. And especially when we're talking about like physical things like articulation, for example, like my whole approach to articulation is, how would you do it if you were speaking or singing?
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
So I think those answers for me are sort of like kind of irrefutable, because it's like that's what human beings do. It's not about the flute. And it's like, I'm doing it, okay, the flute goes there, it doesn't change that much. So I think that you should absolutely, trust your teacher's advice, and make sure you have a teacher that you trust, and all of that if you're a student. But even so, if you feel like they're the best flutists in the world, no matter who they are, you should still question it, because you need to make sure you really understand why it works, not just that it works. Because if you understand why it works, then you don't have to actually practice it as much. Now, I'm not advocating for not practicing, but that's I think my approach, is I want to practice to understand, not just to do. Because if you stop doing, you'll lose it. If you understand, you might lose it if you don't do it a little bit, but you can get it back because you understand what's happening. So I think that is maybe, I always say it's the downside of hero worship. Sometimes we're so enamored with a certain player or teacher, and we take everything they do as, gold, and we just imitate that and try to do that. And, but first, you can only ever be a second best version of somebody else. So you don't want to make that your end game, I think. But also, again, at a certain point of time, you get a little bit lost, because once that influence is gone, you don't kind of know where to go, because you haven't kind of made it understandable to yourself, in a way that you can understand it. So that's, I think, something that I really try to do, is have a lot of, different ways of explaining things that are non-flute related, like following the laws of physics. I'm like the least scientific person ever, but if you do those basic things, then kind of works out, right?
Yeah.
So even, we're talking about articulation. Like, my dad was a golf professional, so I remember him teaching me the swing when I was a kid, and like, it's all about the preparation and the follow through. And when we play, we have to think about how we're preparing something, but also the follow through, whether it be with the articulation or the airstream or something like that. So again, that's not really like a flute term, or even the idea of support. I think so many like people get really confused about like what that means. It means,
Yes, they do.
and I mean, if you look up support in the dictionary, I mean, it's energy. I mean, energy usually flowing towards a point, which is not down, by the way. So sometimes when we play flute, we focus so much on like down, and it's energy. You have to have upward energy to support something, right? Even in the mental sense, if I'm offering support to you as a friend, then my job is to lift you up. So it's support is really continuous energy flowing towards a point, like if the sky was falling and you wanted to support it. So I think, we think support is hold the, abdominals and blah, 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 but that's not support. That's not what support means. So just really thinking a little deeper about what some things really mean and beyond what we're taught, and it doesn't mean that what we're taught is not right, so I think that's one way that I've been able to cultivate my individuality as a teacher.
That's such a meaningful thing to explore, the essence of the concepts that make the flute work and make music effective, and then to foster that in your students. My dear friend Claire Johnson, do you know her? Yeah, something I quote that she said years and years ago all the time is that great flute playing is breathing in and blowing out without any obstacles. And I think, when you understand the concepts, like, we can talk about tongue and lips and blah, 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 and this all day long. But like you said, when you understand it, that it's about a clear air path, that it's about a continuous flow, then there can be this personal exploration where you take all the great advice you've gotten from teachers, but you make it your own, and you're never going to be stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's important. Like embouchure, like sometimes people are so focused on the embouchure, or like the sound, and I think embouchure like becomes sort of like a catch-all term for more things, but for me, the embouchure is kind of like the steering wheel in the car. It's like you don't start with the steering wheel when you're building a car, right? So, it's like the last point of the sound production, like in the ecosystem of it, or on the conveyor belt, or in the factory line, or whatever you want to call it. So I think, again, it's important to have a reference, a real life reference, not a flute bubble reference.
Yeah, you were talking about the golf. I feel similarly. I'm not a sports person at all, but you can't help but notice, any sport, football, tennis, volleyball, there's always that prep, that follow through. And I think it's great when flute players finally get, no one in the world plays a sport where they just stop halfway through the motion.
Yep. I mean, absolutely. Like I said, like I'm not a sports person either, and I'm not very scientific. But like, what I try to tell students is like, if you can. Sometimes I feel like we practice the flute, and then we get the music, and then we sort of just like, okay, superimpose the flute playing on the music, and I mean. That's for me the difference between like expression and musicality. Expression is what we're doing, and musicality is what the music is doing. But if you want to, through your expression, showcase the natural gestures of music, then you need to understand momentum, inertia, and all of those kinds of things, or if you have like a scale passage that goes up and down, it's like,
Right.
roller coaster, right? Like, why do you crank up that stupid hill at the beginning, so you have enough momentum and everything to get through. So, and if you can create those sensations as a player, as a performer, then everyone will understand them, even if they know nothing about music, because they're natural sensations. Natural literally meaning to reflect nature. And nature is also about physics. So I think, again, even if you're not scientific minded, I'm not. It's not like, okay, we go 43.7 inches. Not about that, but it's kind of understanding those basic kind of concepts in life, and then it becomes really relatable, I think, to people.
Yeah, well, I can't help but sense a common thread, just the way you were talking about being uniquely yourself. Only you can do you, and you'll only ever be a second best version of someone else, combined with, if you think about a flutist trying to make every single note perfect, every single note, the perfect tone and embouchure, blah, 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 and ignoring those natural rises and
Mm-hmm.
falls, or even like the clean sound versus the dirty sound. Like, you're right, flute playing, sound, all of it, it has to reflect life, nature, and who we are. It can't be formulaic or in a box, or it's never really going to make sense.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, and it's tough because you do have to have, it's kind of like you have to have all the like B level, if we're talking A B C, B level factors, like sometimes, when students are trying to get their, imagination, their creativity and exploring tone colors, they go straight to A and they sort of skip B, and so then it just sounds kind of off, but they have to go for it, so sometimes I'm like, well, your part of your level of playing is at A, but because you're demonstrating A here, actually I can see that B is missing more, so sometimes that's a hard thing because say for example you're preparing a student for a competition. Well, a lot of my students do competitions, but I'm always going to put the priority on the long-term learning, So maybe I have them down a path where I really want them to go for something. They're exploring something bigger, these bigger A ideas, maybe artistic ideas, but they don't quite have the technical security to nail it every time. What do? Do you just, keep them kind of like, well, keep it here for this competition? Well, maybe. Is that enough? Is that inauthentic? Maybe a little bit. So I always just try to warn my student. I'm like, look, this is how I think that you should go for it. And I know that if you played it like this at the, Paris Conservatory for your final exam, they know it would be going on. I don't know if you go to, and no offense to any state, but like the corner of some small state somewhere, and you do a competition, they might not understand what you're doing because maybe they've been taught different things. So that's the thing about competitions. It's always hard. You might please people sometimes and not all the times. I've judged a million competitions. I've done a lot of competitions. I've had students do competitions, and the gamut is always all over the place in terms. I've judged things where I'm like, were we in the same room, with other people on the jury, like I don't think I heard what you heard, but that's the thing. So it's always hard sometimes to guide a student. So I usually tell them, say for example with the Bach partita, I'll say, look, this is what I think about the breathing, and this is why harmonically, and this is what's going on. If you do that in a competition, no one else plays it that way, so they're gonna think, oh, why are they breathing like that? No one breathes like that. So you got to know, hey, you're true to yourself. This is might work for your long-term artistic performance of this. It might not work in the short term to get like that result that you want for this competition. So you can also decide which one is more important to you in the moment.
Yeah, well, that long game, it's so similar to even the micro idea of the follow through
Mm-hmm.
of the breath on the flute. If you're playing in front of other people, you're putting yourself out there, if you can feel good and connected and like you understand and have that clear conscience of I put in the work,
Mm-hmm.
I'm using my imagination, I'm taking advice that a teacher gave me plus my own feelings, you can have what you were talking about, which is that sense of comfort with yourself. You can feel confidence in yourself because you didn't avoid, you didn't hide from anything. You
Yeah.
faced every task in front of you. And so whether or not you win that competition, that long game ultimately is
Mm-hmm.
going to make you more successful because you feel better about yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's hard. You have limited time with students, especially at the master's goes by 2 years.
Right.
It's just crazy. So I I find I actually sometimes do even more almost remedial work with the graduate students. It's like this is your last chance. You got to confront any kind of
Like fundamental gap.
fundamental
Yeah.
gap that you
Yeah.
have. So I know that you might be itching to play like the Jolivet concerto right now, but like no, we got to play Moy's 24 Little Studies, because if you really understand that, then you are going to be able to play well for the rest of your life. if you don't, you're going to play the Jolly Concerto and graduate and go, why can't I do anything now? So it's, even though it might be not as fun in the short term, you're going to have a lot more fun in the long term, because you're going to feel good about what you're doing, and, feel like you've really invested in something, So, most students are on board with that fine, but I think, especially for the master's level, it's easy to kind of see it as like an extension of the undergrad. So it's just like, I'm just going to bump up everything I sort of did in undergrad. And to me, it's like, nope, that's like the start of really being a real professional, and it's like kind of being a resident, like in the hospital, your graduate years. So you got to really look hard at what you're doing.
Yes.
Yeah.
As we're finishing up today, I would love to circle back one more time to this concept of energy.
Mm-hmm.
I sense this in you and everything that you've talked about today, and just your general presence as a flutist in the community. You've tapped into this renewable energy when every day is about music and practicing and teaching and just diving into your imagination and learning. That is a battery that keeps recharging forever and ever and ever. And I think that's so often overlooked and missed by students who think it's just about the producing itself or about the people pleasing, and then they're so drained.
I agree with you.
This renewable energy.
I talk about that, all the time. I mean, sometimes people say, I don't know how you do it, Professor. I said, well, because I love what I'm doing. I absolutely love what I'm doing. And I couldn't imagine doing anything else. And I don't see it as work. And I do it to please myself. And that's the other thing. I think that students are trying so hard to do the right things all the time for others, because they haven't really kind of figured out who they are and like what they're made of, or what makes them happy. And so again, I think it all goes back to that. And then they get that sort of imposter syndrome because they don't feel like they're meeting other people's expectations. I could give a hooey about other people's expectations. I care about my expectations. And even the idea of again, that is not a problem with students, like respecting me, a teacher. But I tell students, like, the reason why you should respect me as your teacher or this time is because it's your time. This is your education. It's not about respecting me, it's about respecting you, and like using this resource, like I'm a resource for you, and like, so that goes back to the motivation. It's like, well, if I don't motivate, if what you see me doing is not motivating to you, then like there's not a whole lot more than I can do. But I don't want you to be like me. I want you to say, wow, she's figured out how to renew that energy by doing what she really loves to do. So I truly just love music. I mean, I am actually like a super classical music nerd. Like, I don't listen to other kinds of music, not because I don't like think it's good. I just love classical music like so much. I've always been like that. Like, I couldn't tell you like 3 pop songs, like probably, like I'm terrible at it. So that is my world. Like, that imagination that I connect with so much, makes me just thrive, and I really love that. So, and then you feel so accomplished, not because you accomplished something, like you won a prize or something like that, but you did something that made you happy, and you feel successful, and then it's almost like a drug, you just kind of, you go on that. So again, I think it's so important for people to find things that really truly inspire them and make them feel fulfilled, and they feel like they can really put their heart and soul into, and then you will have that kind of renewable energy that you're talking about.
Well, thank you so much, Nicole. This has been a very inspiring and encouraging interview. And I know that people who have the fortune to just listen to you talk about these ideas will walk away better flutists and musicians for it. Thank you so
Well,
much.
thank you so much, Terry. It's been a real pleasure to see you and talk with you. And, you're doing really great things always. And I'm always happy to see them online. And I just want to finish with, I think it, like you said, some people might watch and say, but that's them and I can't do that. No, you absolutely can. You absolutely can. If you just listen to yourself, trust yourself, be who you are, and don't forget to have fun. Don't take yourself too seriously. Work hard, but don't take yourself too seriously. And it's okay to be more than one thing. you know I just want to finish with that because I love fashion and glamour, but some people will look at me and go, well, you're a professor, you have to be, and I say, but why can't I like both things at the same? I can show up to, I can be the first one in the building every morning at 6 a.m. and work harder than anybody, and I can still like fancy sunglasses and bags and shoes. We can be complex people, and that's what makes things interesting. So it's okay to be more than one thing, and you don't have to be inside someone else's box.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I
Yeah.
really have enjoyed this.
Thanks, Terry. Take care.
Take
Bye
care.
bye.
Bye.